So we are in the third week of Lent. Is this working? Okay. We are in the third week of Lent in a series challenging us to listen and discern how God might be calling us to connect with new people or just make new connections with familiar people. 2 weeks ago, Reverend Roy talked about listening. Last week, Reverend Mike talked about discerning. And this week's topic is testing and experimenting. And so I decided that Reverend Roy and Reverend Mike decided to do their own experiment and ask me to preach. So we'll see how it goes. The story we read in Mark today starts out with the father coming to Jesus to help his daughter, who is so ill she's to the point of death. The father's name is Jairus. He's a leader in the synagogue, so I'm thinking he's well respected and prominent in the community, and he appears to be a very caring father because he is essentially begging Jesus for his help, possibly as a last resort or out of desperation. But he doesn't let his pride get in the way of trying to save his daughter. Jesus agrees, and they go on their way to Jairus' home. As they are on their way, the large crowd gathers and starts pressing in on them. People have heard about this Jesus, and they must be curious to see what he might do next. Next, we meet a woman who has had chronic hemorrhaging for 12 years. And it's important to know that during this time, religious purity codes told her she was unclean. And not only that, but that anything she touched was also made unclean. Anyone she touched was made unclean. So she's weak, she's ostracized from her community because of her illness, and on top of that, she's depleted all of her money on doctors trying to be treated, but her condition only worsened. Then she hears about Jesus. And even though she's not supposed to come in contact with anyone, she decides to push herself through the crowd because she thinks if she could just touch the hem of his coat, she might be healed. Now, thinking about this woman and the shame she must have carried from being told she was unworthy, it got me thinking about the many possible reasons that any one of us may have been told we were unworthy. In what ways do we think we're not enough? And how do we let these things get in the way of us acting on faith with the hope for a better day? While this woman doesn't have the courage to ask Jesus to heal her, she does go in spite of any shame she must have felt. She put herself out there with the hope of healing. And that's exactly what happens. Her bleeding stops the moment she touches Jesus' clothes. Jesus is immediately aware that the healing power of God has flowed through him, and it causes him to stop walking, turn around, and say, "Who touched my clothes?" The woman steps forward to tell the truth, and she's fearful and trembling. Now that she's been exposed, she's not feeling as bold as when she forced herself through the crowd. But she knows she's been healed, so she confesses everything to Jesus, and he listens to her, he acknowledges their connection, and he calls her daughter. This woman that was rejected by the rest of her community. Can you imagine how she must have felt after that encounter, after being ostracized from everyone else for the last 12 years? Jesus shows us the love of God is freely given to everyone, even those deemed unworthy by society or even their churches. Now, I don't know if you noticed this part, but the disciples kind of scoffed at Jesus when he asked who touched his clothes. They're a little surprised by his question. They're like, "Jesus, don't you see the crowd? What do you mean, who touched your clothes? Everyone's touching." So I wonder what the mindset of the disciples were in this moment. I wonder if they may have been a little confused as to why Jesus was stopping when they were accompanying this leader in the community to his house to help his dying daughter. Time was of the essence, and that's where I imagine their heads might have been at that point. But Jesus, he was on a whole different level. He was seeking out someone that he had felt connected to, that reached out to him, and you could say he was on a higher vibration. I don't know if you've all heard the term used to talk about a person's emotional state, their vibration. And the way I learned the term is I was introduced through a mentorship program to something called the Emotional Guidance Scale. So for anyone who hasn't heard of it, I'll briefly describe it. I actually have a piece of paper that I don't expect you to see, but it's very simple. It's a list of different emotions, numbered 1 through 22. Number 1 is at the highest vibration. Number 22 is at the lowest. So at the top of the scale, you have love, joy, appreciation. And number 22, you have fear, grief, depression, and shame. And then all the emotions in between range from jealousy, anger, worry, doubt, overwhelm, boredom, hopefulness, enthusiasm, and all the way back up to joy. Now, this isn't just a list of emotions in order of best to worst. It's actually a tool that I was taught to use. I've been gathering tools over the years to deal with depression and anxiety, and this one was helpful to me. What you do is you identify where you are on the scale, and you write down a thought you are having that's creating that emotion. And then looking at the next emotion above it, moving up the scale, you say, what thought could I have right now that's better than the one I'm having? Even if it's not true for you in the moment, you keep writing better thoughts as you work your way up the scale to each elevated emotion, and it actually does help elevate your mood. So the idea is that our emotions come from our thoughts, and our thoughts, if we pay attention to them, can be intentionally shifted towards love. So if we have the capability of shifting our thoughts toward love, then the only barrier we have between us being aligned with the vibration of God's love is our own thoughts. There was something Reverend Roy said a few weeks ago in his sermon. He said, realizing that God's Spirit is already within everyone we meet completely changes our perspective and how we share our lives with those people. We all have the capacity to exude and share the love of God to others. We just have to pursue it so that we can share it. So if we go back to the Gospel of Mark, while Jesus is talking to the woman, people show up from Jairus' house to deliver the terrible news that his daughter has in fact died. They seem to think they don't need Jesus anymore because they say it's too late. But Jesus hears them and he says to Jairus, do not fear, only believe. So they carry on to their home where they find weeping going on by the family, friends. There appears to have been a small crowd who's gathered during this family crisis. And upon entering and seeing this, Jesus says to them, why the tears? The child is not dead, she's just sleeping. And they laughed at him. Remember, Jairus was a religious leader, and there were probably rumors going around about Jesus and his ministry, and we might assume by the reaction of Jairus' extended family laughing at Jesus that they did not have faith she could be healed. So why did Jairus have faith? Could it be that after coming to a desperate situation with his daughter near death, he simply loved his daughter so much, he was willing to abandon his leadership role, make himself vulnerable, put aside his pride, and admit he needed help that could only come from something bigger than himself? Now, his story did have a happy ending. Jesus did bring her back, but not every act of faith results in the ending that we want, even when we want it desperately. We all experience pain and death in various forms, and even if we call on Jesus, we don't necessarily get a miracle with every sincere and faithful request. So maybe this story isn't just about Jesus performing miracles or faith being rewarded by a miracle. Maybe this story can remind us that love found in Jesus is big enough to receive our deepest hurts and fears. Even if it takes a personal crisis for us to fall at his feet, Jesus will simply be present and walk with us. And even if we laugh in disbelief at times, God still works, and sometimes with results we could never imagine. So my challenge to myself and all of us is to examine our thoughts. Pay attention to what we think about ourselves, about those we love, about our colleagues, and about groups of people we aren't really familiar with? And what are our thoughts about God? Are they true? I know we think they're true because we've been thinking them for so long. But look for the evidence. Play devil's advocate with yourself, and if there needs to be a shift in our thought patterns to bring ourselves closer to experiencing God's abundance of joy and love, appreciation and peace, then let's get to work, because unless we can experience those feelings more in our life, we won't be able to share it with the people around us. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen.